And welcome back to another episode of The Process as we go over how I made this image right over here. It was a really fun exploration on colors, composition, the flying whale space explorers. So let's go check it out. All right, let's tone this canvas down. The tone canvas just helps me get my eye to relax and not really have to look at a white canvas. It's very bright. It's also very kind of high contrast on the eyes, especially on the computer screen. So I like to tone it down, use this warm earth tone sienna, burnt sienna sort of tone to kind of get it there. Now the idea, I'd love to talk about the idea really quickly as we sketch this in, is the idea I had was sort of like a mirror lake. You know, such still water that reflected anything above the horizon line as like a mirror. And I had this idea of this pillar that was just oddly balanced or somehow floating in the air with an odd, a little bit of an oddity, right? Like an alien sensibility to this world. If you've been following the other painting process videos that I have about this whole world that I'm creating, which is the flying whale space explorers, basically what I'm trying to explore are really interesting landscapes and ideas, as well as exploring color and other types of compositional exploration with that subject matter. So here's my column. It's placed right in the middle. I'm really trying to play around with sort of almost breaking some of the compositional rules that I was always taught. Some of them I'm still adhering to, other ones, I'm placing something right in the middle, and I'm trying to see if I could still make the composition really, really work. And I think that's an important part of this, which is, part of the growth, I think, and I think I was taught this by an instructor of mine back at, or an art director, which was, sometimes you end up breaking the rules when you learn a lot of the rules initially. And I think I'm at that phase right now where I want to sort of break some of the rules and see what I can still come up with. Now, these circles that I've had laid on the ground, I first used as a flat sort of texture just to get an overall big, medium, and small shape breakdown. And I laid it in perspective on the ground just to give myself a little bit of, don't have to worry about all that ellipse in perspective. Now I'm outlining the pillar over here, but it's also, I'm using a very, very bright saturated orange. One of the things that I wanted to explore in this series was pushing my sense of color. So one thing that I ended up realizing is that I need to push my first color to be super, super, super out of my normal range of colors that I would use. And this helps me kind of almost puts me in a corner where I have to work with this color, It's an exploration. I'm doing these exercises to see if I can, again, make it work, Now, let me erase some of the orange and create the elliptical rocks that are on the surface of the water. Now I can follow the lines. I don't have to be too careful because it is an organic form. It's rock, so there could be a little bit of a jagged edge or a jagged, perspective, or even the silhouette can be a little wonky. So I'm erasing into it, turning off the line drawing right there to see how it's translating. All right, so far so good. Now let's put a sun, like a big, huge, saturated sun back here. This is a fun way, I think, just to like get the silhouette and then just kind of brush in really painterly, and it almost looks like streaks of clouds are on top of it. And one thing to kind of note is back here is you can be super loose, and almost more loose the better, because it makes all the objects in the front much, much more in focus and crisp. So I started laying in this layer of atmospheric clouds and smoke that are on the surface, but this green looks like a bunch of trees. So I just shifted the saturation and the hue, on the saturation, on the slider, just to see what kind of other color combos I can kind of come up with here. Again, just exploring. My sense of color isn't so innate where I can sort of select them just by visually seeing it. I need to have this ability to explore it, adjust it, and see it, and I let my eye become the judge if it's looking correct. All right, now this blue and this orange now becomes the main key, becomes the the palette for the entire piece, you know? So my job at this point isn't to really introduce more colors, but it's to make everything feel balanced, that it all belongs in the same world, you know? The lighting is very simple. It's just that there's a very faint sun in the background, you know, probably a dark, medium, and light sort of value structure from background to foreground. So really my job is to kind of make sure the values are working, number one, but also number two, make sure the colors feel like they're changing saturation. There's a little bit of mixture between the blues and the oranges. And yeah, so that's pretty much what the focus is here. These dark accents. These dark accents for me are one of my most favorite stage of doing this type of painting. It allows me to see these accents, and it's almost as if the 3D form sort of comes alive. There's a lot of design that becomes visible. Now, sampling a little bit of orange from the sky, I've mixed it into the blue of the pillar, and now I'm getting this sort of desaturated orange that represents the side that's being hit by a little bit of bounce light. I don't try to pick the right color, but I try to mix on the actual canvas. I try to mix and see the mixture of the colors and then sample from there. Now let's work on this bottom area. I want to make this bottom part of the pillar feel like it's almost like made out of a rock. Maybe a big... this is like a bigger chunk of what the elliptical rocks are made of. You know, it's just very odd. You know, it hopefully just makes us think, is this ancient? Is it man-made? Is it, how natural is this? How is that part floating up above it? Now, in design, I really like to focus on big, medium, and small shapes. So on this pillar, that's what I'm really focusing on. Big, medium, and small. Not only big, medium, and small forms, but even the mark making, even the proportions of the dark accents, you know, even the horizontal lines between the big segments of the pillar blocks, those are all in a way done big, medium, and small. They're all done a little bit differently, and that's to create visual interest, you know. So that was the whole purpose there. I really wanted to focus on that. Now a little bit of reflection, getting the sun to feel in there. I wanted, again, that idea of the mirror lake, but something, oh man, it doesn't really feel right. The reflection has too many ripples, and ripples in the water means that there's movement. There's a current or a breeze going over it. It's not being completely still, and that's the idea that I wanted to get. Anyway, focusing on a little bit of rendering. That break form where the left edge and the front plane, they are meeting together, that's where I really want to put some interesting shapes, a little bit more narrative, a little bit more storytelling. You know, you can create wonderful narrative through your design language and really tell the story of the location, not just the narrative of a character or the story plot, but the environment itself has a narrative. And designing it in a way where you know, you can show that off, I think is such a fun part of being, you know, creating and doing world building. Let's get our space explorer in there. So first off, I'm just sketching him in a larger, you know, just a bit bigger on the side so I could see the line drawing. This isn't where I'm going to place him. Let me just draw it out first and start to move the character around. Now I've drawn this character so many times it's almost I can like speed draw it. You know, when I first did my first series of this and I was doing the astronaut, you know, the space explorer, I was utterly it would take me so long to do this because I was first learning it. But after mileage and practice and maybe doing 20 or 30 of these characters, I'm getting a lot quicker, you know. And same thing goes with the whales that I'll be adding in just a little bit. So let's get his feet in the water a little bit, standing right there, observing, looking off into the distance. Placed very, very in the center. But I'm still playing with some rule of thirds, but at least for the way they're vertically lined up, right in the center, that's something that I normally don't do. But again, let's see if we can make this work, because I've seen other illustrators and designers and artwork that has things right in the middle, you know? And I was always under this impression that we had to always use the rule of thirds and, you know, so on and so forth. But I think there's a something to it where we're trying to push the limits, you know, and still make it work. Now, with this character here standing sort of in the shadows, not so much of the light, I'm guessing, is going to be hitting the character. So you see, like, you know, too much of a lit edge on him. So I'm just really going to work with graphic shapes, making sure that the shapes of the arm and the gear and the pants, the leg in the front, the leg in the back, they're all a bit more visible just with value structure and graphic shapes. You know, not too much rendering, but just simple, readable shapes. Something that's very challenging about this painting is actually controlling the amount of detail, because I'm trying to make it feel a bit painterly, but it's a challenge when you want to get something to look more, has more information without adding too much detail and keeping the painterliness in it. It's a little bit of the challenge that at least I'm facing. So let's put a little bit of reflections in there, squint the eye down, and see if the values are working. So far, it's pretty good, but gosh, the oranges are getting a bit spotty, just in my opinion. So I think that's something that I'll address shortly. Now I'm painting the reflections in the water below him. It's just I was kind of not paying attention to the crop of the video, but now I'm working back into the inside of the helmet. I loved watching some of the more recent Alien films and the way they design helmets with lights that were inside of the visors and creating such a strong saturated color. That was just so cool. Character number 2. Let's get him off into the distance a bit more, play with some distance and scale, have him face in the other way, sort of like a pinball machine where it goes from 1 to 2 to 3, and it goes from character foreground, character midground, and over to the pillar. So hopefully the eyes bouncing around looking at those individuals. Let's create the reflections in there. Now the character in the back, you know, even less kind of sort of clarity when it comes to all the shapes. So I really wanted to play around with the graphic nature of everything. Make sure that you could at least see the shadow side and the, I guess, lit side in this scenario. Now the clouds in the back, they were super, super loose. A little bit too loose when I thought I was doing them back there, but now that I have the character that's in front and where eye is more looking at the character, the clouds, yeah, they feel right. Feels cool. All right, now I was talking about painting a lot of whales lately too, so I'm getting so comfortable actually with painting the whales specifically in this viewpoint, and most of the whales that I've been adding in have been in here like this. So I should probably change it up, but I'm getting so much more mileage with painting this, and it becomes really efficient. I kind of know what to do. I know how to effectively get it in there and put it in the right shapes so that it looks like the whale. So very, very fun, you know. It's really fun to get into a subject matter and repeatedly kind of go through it so that you grow more of a mastery with the subject matter, not just that you've done it and it's like a check mark on your list, but actually doing it so you really absorb it, you know. I think that's a different mindset. It's a different thought process altogether. All right, let's get the whales to feel like they're in between the pillar and the background, you know, flying somewhere in that distance. I'm not sure how far they are really, so I have to first design it in there and then maybe play around with the atmospheric perspective that we have. So the lakes, the water, the reflection, it's challenging. You know, I was fiddling with it just a little bit ago, and it's the right idea, but it's not going the same way. So, you know, during a break, I actually took the time to just copy and paste the pillar itself to look like a mirror reflection, and I actually like this sort of sensibility a lot more. It's so still, you know, mirror-like. It's such a, I think if I was at a real lake in the wilderness and saw a lake that was this still, it becomes sort of intriguing, magical, mysterious all at the same time, which is definitely the thought that I had for this. Now, just getting a little bit more information, details, some cracks, I guess set dressing, in this overall area, and just doing a little bit of cleanup, kind of looking at the background. And now it's a time where the painting really is sort of at its point where the idea is pretty realized. So now I can take a time out on the idea and just focus on how to develop, the consistency, making sure the mark making looks correct. Is there any perspective errors? Are there any brushstrokes that should be connected that aren't? So you can see I'm adjusting a little bit of the background, and we are now at the finale of this piece. It was a really good learning experience, and you can see that I really started off with that strong orange to just be the key, right? There's almost a 2/3 proportion of orange, a 1/3 proportion of the blue, and it's just kind of making that proportion not only feel like it's consistent throughout the whole piece, but playing around with like different vibrations, saturations of that color mixture. On the next painting, I might choose another color to go even, in the same direction. Maybe it might be a green color, a super saturated green, or a mint, a mint color, or an aqua. I might start with something in that range and see if we can come up with the same exploration and results. So thank you for joining me on another episode of The Process. This was more specifically on the Flying Whale Space Explorers, and we'll catch you on the next one. If you guys like what you see, please give me a like and subscribe if you want to see more. And we'll check you guys out on the next one. We'll see you. Take care.